and welcome to Titanic Legacy, a podcast that explores Titanic's lasting impact through conversations with creators, interesting, inspirational people who continue to keep the Ship of Dreams legacy not only alive, but thriving through their creative work and or storytelling. I'm your host, Paul Carganilla, and these days, at least, there are a plethora of Titanic podcasts, Facebook groups, you name it. You could Google, you could rabbit hole for days. But it wasn't always this way. And I was nearing the end of the first season of my original podcast, covepod, in which I would have conversations with creators, musicians, actors, writers. And I thought, I want to dive into the Titanosphere and talk to people who are still creating, and not just still creating, but starting new things that still explore Titanic's legacy and keep the story going, keeping her alive in our hearts and minds and keeping that creative spark lit. Our guest today is doing just that. He has assisted with various Titanic projects, co-founded the Titanic Enthusiasts Facebook group, and he runs the Titanic Legacy Museumgram on Instagram, as well as the Titanic Legacy Online Museum website. Can't wait to dive into everything with him. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the podcast, Joshua Noble.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome, good sir. I'm so honored that you took the time to sit down and chat with us about your creative fire and what keeps it lit in the Titanic sphere. That's probably a thing that didn't just land in my brain, but Titanosphere, Titanosphere, the Titanic universe, the Titanic realm. I always ask, I get the opportunity to talk to people all around the world in these conversations. May I ask, what general area of the world are you joining us from?
I'm joining from, technically it's Loganville, Georgia, but most people just would know it as an hour outside Atlanta.
Perfect. Yeah, I live about an hour outside LA, so I totally understand being able to explain it to people like that. Well, again, we connected at TitanicCon 2023 in Las Vegas. I think for the very first time is where we met. But here in this digital, virtual, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Titanic world, we have gotten to keep in touch, which is super cool. And I'm very grateful. I'm going to say thank you about 100 times for you spending the time with us today. But let's dive into, reel it back all the way to your Titanic origin story, as we do so many times on these kinds of shows. I know just by Googling your name, you're in newspaper articles and you've been doing this for quite some time. And when did you first get bit and how?
I was 6 years old, and we were returning home from church on an Easter Sunday, and my mother made some correlation with the Titanic and how many people were there. It was a Southern Baptist church. Everyone goes to church in the South on Easter Sunday. So I was like, "What's the Titanic?" She gave me a small explanation, and I was like, I wanted to dive in. I wanted to learn more. I was homeschooled. So the library was a pretty regular place for us to go to. So next time I was at the library, I started getting books about the Titanic and VHS tapes, and it just spiraled from there.
So did you have like 700 people going to your church on Easter Sunday, or was it 1,500, or was it 2,200?
I don't remember how many were there. I just remember it being packed, but that's all I remember.
We'll talk about your museum, your online museum, a little bit later, but is that when you started your collection?
My collection started later. It started with a replica second-class bowl that I bought at an exhibit in 2005 when it came to Atlanta. And from there, it was just, I had to get more, and then it evolved from replicas to I have to get some originals. So it just has gone from there.
Wow. And so growing up, was it something that you kind of was always a hobby or an interest on the side, or did the kids at school know you as that's the Titanic guy?
Both. So, like for a lot of people, I think Titanic sort of wanes, ebbs and flows. So certain parts of my life, I was totally obsessed with it, and other times, it was sort of a side hobby um, that I did. But the kids in the homeschool community did know me as the Titanic guy. The adults knew me as the Titanic guy. They'd bring all kinds of stuff they'd read online, try to ask me about it or something like that. And when they started announcing different wreck expeditions or whatever, they'd ask, "What's your thoughts on it?" I'm like, "Well, sounds cool," But yeah, it became known as that guy.
And sometimes when we record these episodes live on YouTube and then to be published later as a podcast, but I do notice that we do have some people watching live. If you have any questions for Josh, go ahead and ask him as we're having this conversation. I'll work them in before we say goodbye and thank you to him. But I was curious because I was seeing you were having your own, like, again, just Google Joshua Noble Titanic. You had your own like sections in museums.
Um, so not exactly. The first time I've had anything in a museum is recently with Pigeon Forge, and I was lucky enough to acquire a page of sheet music that is from the valise found in Wallace Hartley's body, and so that's currently in Pigeon Forge on display with some other stuff. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's in the same room as now the Strauss pocket watch and the Strauss letter.
Wow,
So yeah, that's really cool, and I got a few more pieces going up to the museum soon to be on display.
that's so cool.
Um,
How do you acquire these pieces?
Different places, other collectors, some stuff will pop up on eBay, um, and different auction sites and all that. So it's a variety of things. You have to be careful because there's a lot of fakes. There's a lot of stuff that happens, and it's easy to get tripped up with them.
What is it? Not chain of command, but
A provenance.
what is it?
It's a provenance or chain of ownership.
Chain of own. Yeah, I'm trying to think of that because I work in the world of law enforcement. There's a there's a term for evidence. Like you have to be able to prove that it's exactly, but it's the same thing, and that can be tricky, even with movie props. As I know you collect some, and I collect some as well. Like you can't just show somebody something and say this was this and this to you,
Right.
and that can be difficult sometimes. But as I talked about in the introduction, I love celebrating the creative spirit that continues through the generations today. And you started your email address is Titanic Gazette. Was that your
Mhm.
first foray into creating something that was inspired by Titanic?
Yes, I had a blog when I was a teenager called Titanic Gazette, and that was my way of writing Titanic stories, the story of this passenger or that. And my research has gotten a lot better since then. So before I had Encyclopedia Titanica and whatever articles I could find online. Now I have learned how to use the ancestry sites. Learned how to track down certain things and certain relatives and all that to try to get more information. So like you have Titanic Gazette where I wrote about passengers, and most of it would come from Encyclopedia Titanica or and certain other sites or certain documentaries. And now for the new site, for the museum site, I have an article about the life of John Bertram Brady, and he's a name that most people in the Titanic world haven't come across. But he was from Washington, and he was a single guy traveling alone. And in my research, I was able to get in touch with a lady from a local museum up in Washington, Pomeroy, Washington, and she sent me all kinds of documents and letters and stuff, copies of them related to John Bertram Brady. And then the local archives had a bunch of stuff on him as well. And so from those, I was able to sort of piece together his life to create a full picture of what his life was like before Titanic.
And you're doing that on your website now.
Yeah. There's that was one of the first major articles that I've created for the site. Since then, I've done the Strausses. I've got one about the Astors that's coming up in the not too distant future, depending on college and family and work going on at the same time. So,
And this is the website. It's titaniclegacy.us. This is the one, right?
yes.
Okay. And when people navigate over here, it's just scrolling down a little bit to discover the Titanic stories here. You have so much amazing stuff. And I think we're going out of order chronologically. So I will jump back to this. But then from your blog, what was next? Was it the Facebook group or the Instagram?
Yeah, it was the Facebook group Titanic Enthusiasts, which has a history with the Titanic Historical Society. I met some really great people there, and it sort of became its own thing. And Titanic Enthusiasts has really blossomed into one of the larger Facebook groups of its kind. I think there are ones with more members, but it's one of the top ones, and it's had some really good quality conversations on it between some of the historians that are members, as well as the newbies who are asking really good questions and finding stuff as they go.
When did you first join Titanic Historical Society?
I joined the forum and then joined the society. I forget the year. It was it was probably 2010 or 2011. And then I went to the meeting in 2013, the 50th anniversary, which was in Pigeon Forge. That was where I got to meet a lot of wonderful people. Ken Marshall, Don Lynch, Ed Commuta, and some of the others.
That's amazing. We had Don at the anniversary event that we hosted on the Queen Mary in April, and I was talking to him about it. I said, "Why don't we do these annual? Why doesn't the Titanic Historical Society do these annual meetings anymore?" It kind of fell off during COVID and hasn't come back yet. So we are actually in talks to hopefully start getting that launched back up again. And we have a few guests that are already kind of committed to doing another anniversary event in April. So I'm already plugging. I don't know where it will be. Probably on the Queen Mary, but we may be having a new Titanic Historical Society event. It's possible that we'll jumpstart it back up again starting in 2026. That would be fun. My first convention was the one where I met you, and I guess I didn't realize that had been going on. I honestly hadn't heard of the Titanic Historical Society until probably COVID, and I was bored bumping around on the internet. But when I saw that this conference was happening in Vegas and I had never seen the big piece, I had to get over there. All I'd ever really seen, I still have Pigeon Forge on my bucket list, but I'd just been to the traveling exhibits that'll bring maybe a piece or two from Titanic, but it's mostly from Olympic. They had one here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library a bunch of years back, but the
I
time
went.
in Vegas was really my first time being immersed in a meeting amongst other like-minded Titanic enthusiasts, but also being able to be surrounded by so many actual artifacts like the big piece. Has there been, or what items have you been in the presence of that have really, I don't know, struck a chord or made you feel a certain way?
The big piece is definitely one of them. The big piece has I don't know how to describe it. I'm religious, but I'm not superstitious, if that makes sense. I but it seems to have a certain presence, like it has stories to tell if you are willing to listen, there are stories that you can glean from the big piece. The Madeline Astor life jacket. So for Titanic on, what happens is whenever it's in Pigeon Forge, usually the curator, Paul Burns, brings artifacts that we can see that are not on display in the museums. And one year he brought the Madeline Astor life jacket,
Hmm.
and we got to see it out of its case. Um, got to look at it up close, and it was just really, really cool to do and see. That was a very, very special moment. Um,
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the one that Titanic Historical Society had first?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, they own it.
Wow. Have you yeah, I just throwing it back before we get too far away from it. The big piece for anybody who hasn't, any Titanic enthusiasts out there who have not been in the presence of it. It sounds cheesy to say been in the presence of, but it is a presence. You walk into the room, and I think part of it is how well they have it lit and presented, and um, just the atmosphere in which they have preserved it and um, have it on display. But you feel the energy.
Yeah.
It feels like you're in a room full of, again, at the risk of sounding cheesy, souls. It's
Hmm.
at that spiritual energy. You
Yeah.
mentioned church. It kind of feels like you're in church.
And
Uh,
it's kind of weird because you don't I've seen both the big piece and the little big piece. The little big piece, I don't get that. I don't get that energy. The big piece, I do. It's a very, even though they both were one, the same section. It's a weird sort of thing, but I guess different artifacts speak in different ways. Another one was, so for the 100th anniversary, I went to an artifacts exhibit in Atlanta. It was a temporary one, and one of the artifacts they had was the sconce from the a la carte restaurant.
hmm.
And this was April 14th, 2012. And I was looking at it and it hit me. This was once lit with electricity going through it. And below it were first class passengers, many of them having their final meals of their lives. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Um, sort of, yeah, it was an interesting moment.
It's kind of a side note, but you mentioned the sheet music. Have you seen the violin?
I have, when I was on display in Pigeon Forge, that was interesting.
Interesting how. Elaborate.
Well, I was able to sort of get to where I got to see it almost alone. There was a custodian with me, or there was a museum employee with me, but I got to see it basically alone and photograph it. And yeah, it was a beautiful piece, really powerful.
Have you been to the actual grave sites of any victims or survivors that then passed?
A few. Yeah, I've been to some victims and some survivors. Most of the victims I've been to are just memorials. Archibald Butt has a memorial in Arlington National Cemetery. He's actually not far from Robert Todd Lincoln, and it's the location where he intended to be buried. There's a tree nearby that he planted. It's a peaceful spot. It sort of stands out because it's not a uniform shape like the other graves. It's a beautiful sort of Celtic-looking cross. Um, and then Annie Funk, that one almost made me cry because you go there, it's in this rural town in Pennsylvania. She was a Mennonite missionary in second class, and she did not survive. She started a school in India for girls at a time when girls were not encouraged to have an education in India. She believed that every girl, every woman had a right to be able to read and write and educate herself. So, and she learned that her mother was ill, so she was coming back to see her mother, and you can just feel the grief of her parents because you visit the site. It's this beautiful, yet simple granite memorial to their daughter, and right in front of it is are the graves of her parents, and you kind of get the sense that they wanted to be buried symbolically, at least with their daughter.
I think it's fascinating when you get the there is that feeling of mourning and connection, even if it's just an artifact like the sconce and being at the place where the person was laid to rest. And what scares the heck out of me is that, as you know, we're feeling it because we're so interested in it, and we're only 113 years removed. But in future generations, like, I wonder how much of that will be able to preserve. And I think that's why I part of the reason I wanted to start this show and keep talking about it was to keep, years after I'm done talking to people, interviewing people, this will still be available for people to stumble across if they're interested in it, and to hear these stories of people like you who are visiting these sites, who are, celebrating these artifacts. We it, the more we do that, I think the longer we can keep that spark going. So I'm just so hopeful that the work people like you are doing will continue to keep the memory of all of Titanic's passengers and crew members alive for many generations to come, and and many more people in the future can have this kind of connection and can feel that, the sense of how important this history is. um, we've talked about your Facebook group and your website we're going to get back to, but let's talk about Titanic Legacy Museumgram on Instagram. When did that kick off?
So that kicked off a few years ago. I don't remember the exact date of it, but um, that kicked off just as sort of a way for me to share interesting facts and information about Titanic. And I do follow a number of other pages. Some of the Titanic fans share a lot of stuff that other people share, other content. And I kind of do as well to an extent, but it's not just that. I enjoy creating content and telling stories that are not as prominent out there. So, like the story of Eloise Smith, you see in the middle there, her story coming home her from her honeymoon, losing her husband, and then marrying another survivor, Robert Daniel, and just so many stories like that they're told, um, if you really look, but they're not as prominently out there. And so I try to generate content that will tell their stories and generate interest that will keep their memory alive. Ernest Hemingway famously said that a man dies twice: when when he has his final breath, and when his name is last spoken. And I might have butchered that saying, but the spirit of it's still there. Um, and I believe that's the case for many people. But for Titanic, we have an opportunity to speak their names, tell their stories, so that they don't have that second death.
I love that you're doing that work. And yeah, it's always fascinating me, this whole idea. It's been said many ways by different cultures, but it's the Dia de los Muertos thing, where it's like, keep their photos, keep their memories,
Hmm.
at least once a year, speak their name, and keep their spirit going. Kind of as if you're a Pixar or Disney fan, the movie Coco illustrated very well. But I am just fascinated by people who continue to do this as you do, and not just kind of half-assed. You do great work, and you're not getting paid for it. People think like, "Ooh, Paul's doing a podcast. He must be, raking it in." I spend money to do the podcast, and I just do it because I love it, and I love talking to people about, things that we share interests in. And I want to share. You mentioned, there are other sites that do this. There are a lot of other Instagrams that do it, but it's not because anybody's and correct me if I'm wrong, but no one's competing with each other. We're just creating this stuff because we celebrate what we love.
Hmm.
And it's not about rates, ratings, clicks, whose is more popular than others. In my opinion, it's just like everyone's got their own set of friends, and if you're sharing something, you see something cool that you like, that you share it, they share it. It's not, nobody has ownership over these, and the more that we talk about these stories, the more reach it has, and the longer it'll stay in people's minds. So
The
I think
Titanic sank in international waters. No one really truly owns it. I mean,
that is a quote that I'm going to print. We should have T-shirts made just just
yeah,
to
feel free.
remind people. Um, All right, so now let's buckle down and focus on this website, because there's so much here to explore and really dig into. We mentioned the stories that you're writing there as kind of like a legacy blog for your Titanic Gazette. That was your first project. But what else if somebody said, "Hey, I'm going to go check out your website," other than the answer of look at everything, what are your favorite or things that you tell people to dig into when they go?
I enjoy so some of the ones that stick out to me. There's a silk postcard. It's one of not it's one of few that exist from the ship. Um, there is a piece of deck chair about 18 inches long. Um, and so that's pretty rare. I think there's only I hear different numbers of how many deck chairs there are, but this one in particular was recovered by the CS Minya, and there were two that were owned by the first officer, Adams. And unfortunately, they were both damaged during the Halifax explosion.
Hmm.
So these are survivors of not just one, but two disasters. And eventually, one deck chair was dismantled, and I was told that it was used for Dimensions for the Cameron movie. I'm not 100% on that one, but but that's a really cool piece. And then there's a letter written by Chief Officer Wild on one of his previous ships. He's someone that I've sort of identified with a little bit as a family man who really tried to do his duty. Unfortunately, he suffered a lot of loss. He knew grief was a friend of his, unfortunately. And he's a bit of a mystery or enigma, if you will, during the sinking because he and there was a mix-up of the officer rankings with their with their stripes on their arms. So with some of the accounts, you'll see someone say the first officer or the chief officer. Well, Murdoch was wearing a chief officer's uniform. And so when someone says chief officer, who do they mean? So there's a bit of mystery on Wild's actions
Wow, that's
and what all
fascinating.
he did during the sinking. We know some of the stuff he did, but it's not all clear.
That is fascinating. TitanicLegacy.us. I'm going to let everybody out there who's listening who hasn't heard of it dig in. I have to make a disclaimer. My podcast is not connected in the Titanic Legacy online museum that Josh. When I was trying to think of a name for the podcast, it just made a lot of sense to me because like this is what I'm exploring is
Hmm.
the people who are keeping the legacy alive, and then I publish it and come to find, oh, there's a Titanic Legacy Facebook group. There's a Titanic Legacy book being published. There's Titanic Legacy Instagram and museum. But uh, you know, I just don't want anyone to think like,
It no, it just happened. Like I was actually thinking of doing a podcast called Titanic Legacy, and then you started yours, and it's like, oh, well, that's taken. And I know you had no knowledge of it whatsoever, but it was kind of funny.
well, how about this? I mean, I asked you for a half hour every time, and I've already taken it.
Hey,
But
I love talking about Titanic. So
why don't I have you on more often? And
Okay.
you can tell us stories about these little known, like we could even make it like a monthly thing where you tell us these stories. Like you texted me about the Ernst Danbaum, the Latinans. I looked at this and said, yeah, these are little known stories. I don't think I've heard of either of those people. And you're sharing the stories on your website and doing your best to keep the legacy going and growing. And I totally, I'm just, for everyone out there, I'm blindsiding him with this. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but if you want to make it a regular thing and talk about these people's stories on the Titanic Legacy podcast, I'd love to have you on more often.
Hey, say when. I'd be happy to do it.
Love that. Well, thank you. And anything else that you're doing that I can tell point people toward and have them check it out, or have we covered pretty much all of it?
I mean, I've got a few projects in the works that I can't quite talk about yet, but it's very exciting talking, like researching different Titanic connections
Mm.
to different places. And so I've got some exciting stuff in the works, but again, I've got, family, job, and school going on at the same time. So Titanic sort of takes a back seat most of the time. And the times I actually get to do Titanic, it's, full research and all that until I have to dive back into the other stuff.
Blink twice if you're working on a book. For you
So,
podcast listeners, you're gonna have to go back to the find us on YouTube to get the answer to that. I love everything that you're doing, man. And every time I've reached out to say, hey, you want to help me out with this project, you've always been totally open. And I just appreciate your time again today and all the ways that you're keeping Titanic's memory thriving.
of course. Yeah, it's a fun thing to do. It's an honor to do it. It's an honor to really tell their stories and be one of the ones to keep the flame alive, or however you want to say it. I
Yeah.
guess we're all stokers of Titanic's legacy boiler. I don't know how to better say that, but
Keep the flame. I in my other podcast, not Titanic related, I call it Your Heart's Fire. We're keeping Titanic's boiler lit, as you say, by keeping the stories going and growing. And we're preserving her memory and celebrating and honoring everyone lost. And Josh, you're doing amazing and important work. Keep it up, and thank you for joining us.
thank you.
And everybody out there, if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, leave a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. If you love conversations with inspirational creators, you can find more on my personal podcast, covepod. Click over, give that a listen. Explore that heart's fire and where it can lead people. I want to say thank you one more time to our awesome guest today, Joshua Noble. Thank you, everybody, for listening and tuning in. And until the next episode, seize the day, follow your heart's fire, keep Titanic's boiler lit. That's the new one. And, of course, make each day count. See you next time, everybody.